Hello, everybody. Welcome to Economics with the Honorable David M. Walker, the former Comptroller General of the United States. And today we're going to discuss a topic that we've discussed before called the national debt. And the reason we're discussing, we believe there's been some new life around Congress about actually looking at the area. Now, I think it's kind of hard to ignore because it's 39 trillion or 38 trillion going to 39 trillion. And there's no brakes on this train as it keeps heading down the path of destruction. And now that it's like we're ignoring it, but I don't know how you can ignore the 800-pound gorilla that's sitting right in the corner. But we're going to ask the Honorable David M. Walker, the former Comptroller General of the United States, about the national debt and see if there's any life or intelligent life in Washington, D.C. So, David, good to have you here. And of course, we're looking at seeing if we can find any intelligent life in Washington, D.C. I had a rumor they're actually going to take a look at this in Congress, but that might be just a rumor on the internet. Is this real? Are they really going to look at it? We're talking, 38 trillion going to 39 trillion, and I just don't know if there's any intelligent life in Washington, D.C. So maybe you can update us. Maybe they are looking at this, not looking at us. Let us know.
Well, first, there is intelligent life in Washington, D.C., but there's not enough intelligent life in Washington, D.C. With regard to this issue, last week I testified before the House Judiciary Subcommittee on the Constitution about the need for a constitutional amendment in order to restore fiscal sanity and sustainability. And while on one hand, I compliment the committee for holding the hearing, on the other hand, it deteriorated largely into a bunch of partisan bickering where the Democrats blamed the Republicans for too many tax cuts. The Republicans blamed the Democrats for too much spending. And there was not enough focus and attention on the real problem and what needs to be done to deal with it. In particular, I made the case for why this was a serious threat to America's future economic prosperity, national security, and domestic tranquility. I provided plenty of data in order to be able to back that up. There was a general feeling that, yes, we need to do something. And I also told them that I felt that there was two critical things that needed to be done in order to defuse our debt bomb. First, we needed a constitutional amendment that limited how much debt as a percentage of the economy the country can take on. Stated differently, a credit card limit, but one that is enforceable. That's the only thing that will bind current and future Congresses. The debt ceiling is a bad joke. Other statutory constraints have not stood the test of time, and that either Congress needed to do it directly by 2/3 of the House and 2/3 of the Senate proposing the identical amendment and then sending it to the states for 3/4 of them to ratify it. Or if they can't do that, which I do not believe they can in the current environment, then they need to allow the states to do it through a limited Article 5 convention, limited solely to the issue of fiscal responsibility, and provided evidential matter that there were enough state applications that they should have done it as far back as 79 and as recently as 2017. So we'll see, what ends up happening there. So the first thing is we've got to have a constitutional amendment. That's going to take some time, but we need to have that. And secondly, we need to have a statutory commission that learns the lessons from the former Simpson-Bowles Commission, which was not statutory, that will engage the American people with the facts, the truth, the tough choices, solicit input, and set the table for two sets of recommendations that will be guaranteed a vote in Congress. One, to restore the solvency and sustainability of Social Security, standing alone. And secondly, to reduce, and yes, I use the word reduce, debt as a percentage of the economy to a reasonable and sustainable level over the next 10 to 15 years with triggers, targets, and automatic enforcement mechanisms. And I'm in the process of providing the Congress examples of what could and should be done in that regard. as well as other reforms to our budget process, because our budget system now is badly broken. As you know, Nick, the only thing that Congress is supposed to do under the Constitution every year is pass all the appropriations bills by the beginning of the fiscal year. The last time they did was 1996, and they've only done it 4 times in my lifetime. So obviously the system is broken. We need a number of reforms, and that's enough for the opening. But at some point, what we ought to try to do, maybe a little bit later in this, after we get past this debt issue, is to talk about immigration and tariffs, because they have significant economic consequences, and our Supreme Court is scheduled to hear cases on both of those issues that I think is particularly noteworthy.
Okay, what we'll do is we'll bring in our panel. We do have people from outside the United States who's going to join us. So we're going to listen to our friend in Canada, Sasha Starr, and of course our friend in Bangladesh, which is Dr. Sharif, where about 50% of the world's population lives, that we also ignore. And of course, in Los Angeles, we have Rick Rosner. So we have to have our token American on the panel. But we'll start with our friend in Canada, because he also runs Modern Investing. He's into investing, and the United States, of course, has a little bit of a debt problem. I'm wondering if, Sasha, you would invest in a country that has a GDP ratio like we do, and a $39 trillion debt. Would that be a place you would park your hard-earned Canadian dollars?
It's not enough that $39 trillion, it's a staggering figure. It has tendencies to grow even higher and higher. So next time, a few weeks later in our program, we will admit that it's now $40 trillion. How large is this number, $40 trillion? No, nobody knows. It's difficult to comprehend, and even more difficult to comprehend how that debt figure will go lower. I don't recall actually in the last few years that the debt of the United States would go lower. It goes higher. It would stay the same, but I don't recall that it would go lower. David, am I right?
No, correct. And Sasha, let me be clear. I think the right metric is debt as a percentage of the economy. Not all debt is bad. Some debt is necessary, and we're not going to pay off all this debt. People that say we need to pay off the debt or don't know what they're talking about. But what we do need to do is that we need to have a reasonable level of debt as a percentage of the economy. That's what needs to go lower. And here's what's interesting about that, Sasha. If you focus on debt to GDP, if you grow the denominator faster than the numerator, even if the numerator is going up, you're making progress. And that's what we need to do, because at the end of World War II, we grew the denominator much faster than the numerator, but now we're doing exactly the opposite. So you're right, we're not reducing debt, we're adding debt. But what's happening is that we're adding debt at twice the rate of growing the economy. So that means the debt to GDP number is going up, and we need to reverse that through more economic growth, through regulatory reform, through additional revenues, through comprehensive tax reform, and through reduced projected spending, both mandatory and discretionary spending. Rick?
So how's the government doing on those objectives? Right now, the stock market is running pretty hot, but that tends to be a GOP governance thing where the market runs hot, and then people take too many, and the finance people take too many risks, the market crashes, then the Dems come in and have to clean up some of the wreckage. But how's the government doing right now in achieving your objectives?
Well, first, as you know, the stock market is really looking at about 6 months, okay? And the stock market right now is, looking at the fact that other than the first quarter of 2025, where we actually had negative economic growth of, I think, about 0.6%, that we've had above average economic growth and higher than expected since the first quarter. And, given the regulatory relief, given the extension of what were supposed to be expiring tax cuts, given the energy policies of the current administration, given the advancement of AI, and we both know there are pluses and negatives to that, the market believes that things are going to be good in 2026. They also believe that the Fed is going to cut the Fed funds rate by 25 basis points or 0.25% this Wednesday. We'll see, whether that happens. But what markets don't do, and frankly, what insurance, what rating agencies don't do, is they don't look to the structural longer-term situation. They're myopic as well. And that's where we have the problem. How well are we doing? We're not doing well at all, Rick, we're not doing well at all. And, we're projected to have anywhere from a $1.8 to $1.9 trillion deficit this year. As I said, that's double the rate of increase in the economy based on reasonable assumptions. So, we need to recognize reality and start making some tough choices. And it's not just a matter of what the choices need to be. It's how do you get them done? And that's why I say you need the commission in order to facilitate making the tough choices. And you need the constitutional amendment to force the Congress and the president to continue to invoke fiscal discipline over time, because if left by themselves, it won't happen until we have a crisis. And that would be, among other things, in my view, a global depression.
Yeah, well, we're going to go to Dr. Sharif in Bangladesh, and I did check out their debt to GDP ratio. It's about 37%, where we're like over 110%. So it's weird. Bangladesh is in actually a financial more sound position in the United States of America. So Dr. Sharif, coming from Bangladesh, what are your thoughts on the American economy and their huge debt?
Yeah. One thing I always say that, as I am an economist, I always say that country like USA or the big countries, they have to focus on country like Bangladesh. They have to do more business with a country like Bangladesh because of these financial conditions. But I have a very close understanding about US economy, but I have a very clear proposal for USA. Number one, they have to go for a short-term plan, stabilize near-term demand and markets, which is very much important. I think that USA, especially Trump administrations, want to do manufacturing industry. It's good, but definitely they have to understand the competitiveness and other things. Secondly, I believe USA has to repair supply side constraint and boost productivity, which is very, very important for their economy. And third thing, they have to secure long-run fiscal sustainability, which may cause different kind of low and middle income households, and it may helpful for them. But how USA can overcome this $38 trillion economy? Definitely, country like Bangladesh. The reality is that in terms of paper and everything, and maybe it's a $500 billion economy every year, but I believe it's a $1 trillion economy, because everything is not, this economy is on paper, on data. But there are a lot of business and many things which is not in data and other things. Like China, what China actually doing? China heavily investing in Bangladesh, in Pakistan, in Africa, in Malaysia, and they actually grow their economy in an effective way. On the other hand, we are observing that USA actually go for tax, tariff, and all of the competition. For short term, maybe they are getting some sort of result from there, but it's in a long term, it will not be helpful for them. So I believe USA can overcome from these situations. They have to open their market. They have to focus on the immigration's law, rules, and regulations, honestly speaking, because immigrant create a lot of business and financial values in US economy. And third, I believe that US businessmen, like Chinese businessmen, like let's say Nick or Sasha, those who want to invest, you should make your business country like Bangladesh, Pakistan, or Africa and other country. This way, you can make a lot of profit for your country. That is one thing. And always I want to welcome American people to emerging economy, because maybe they will get better jobs compared to USA. Maybe your startup get better business in Bangladesh or in Pakistan or in India. So this is the way we can create a value for US market, and US market can overcome from this situation. Honestly speaking, how I see this world, 38 to 40 trillion dollar is not hard for USA, because USA has a huge impact with their culture, with their democracy, with your Hollywood, with your social media, with your technology business, with your startup. So still they have possibilities, but you need good leaders who will be dynamic, who will be thought-provoking, who can understand. That is my observations, and maybe I can learn more from Honorable David Walker.
I want to go back to constitutional amendments. Last constitutional amendment passed or was ratified in 1992. It was trivial and dealt with Congress can't vote itself a pay raise. The last significant amendment, which lowered the voting age from 21 to 18, passed in 1971. So I don't know, how do you get an amendment through all the hurdles?
Well, first, it's interesting to note that the 27th Amendment, which deals with congressional pay, was originally one of the proposed provisions for the Bill of Rights, but it didn't get adopted as part of the Bill of Rights. The second thing that was very interesting about the 27th Amendment is it took over 200 years to ratify that proposed amendment. And the third thing that's interesting about it is a high school student is the one who discovered through research that the amendment had been ratified but never been certified by the archivist that had been ratified. And a related point is that the not-for-profit that I run, the Federal Fiscal Sustainability Foundation, did the research and found out over 3 years ago that there were enough applications from states for a limited convention to propose a fiscal responsibility amendment as far back as 1979 for 25 years, and then again in 2016 and 2017, and Congress never did anything. So to answer your question, Rick, there's two ways to get an amendment under Article 5. It's only one paragraph, okay? 2/3 of the House and 2/3 of the Senate have to pass an identical amendment, and then 3/4 of the states have to ratify. Based upon the current environment in Congress, in my opinion, and a number of leaders in Congress have agreed with me on this, there's no way that Congress is going to pass a proposed amendment in the House and the Senate that can gain 2/3 support. In particular, a traditional balanced budget amendment, like many states have, where you're trying to balance the budget on an annual basis, not only does it make sense at the federal level, it's politically infeasible at the federal level. The second way to get an amendment is if 2/3 of the states, or 34, file an application with Congress for a Article 5 convention, not a constitutional convention, a limited convention to propose one or more amendments, then the Congress shall call the convention. Express, enumerated, ministerial responsibility, no discretion on behalf of the Congress. My not-for-profit that I had discovered that goal line was crossed as far back as 79. And now we're trying to get Congress to do the right thing, to either pass their own amendment, which they will do, or call the convention. And if the convention doesn't get called within a reasonable period of time, to get states' attorneys general to sue the Congress for failure to call the convention, which would be dealt with at the Supreme Court level, which would be the biggest constitutional crisis in the history of this country. Because basically what the Congress has done is they've mooted one of the key provisions that the founders inserted in the Constitution as a check and a balance over abusive and expansive federal power. And we must keep in mind that the states created the federal government, not the other way around. And the Congress is trying to undercut the ability of the states to exercise their rights.
So, do you have any attorneys general who are ready to sue over this?
I've got a couple I'm talking to now, and there are others that I think would follow.
Yeah. Also, there's Jeffrey Schwab at the Liberty Justice Center in Washington, D.C. He's the lead counsel on the tariff lawsuit that went to the Supreme Court recently. He's been on our show before, David. He might be, once they're done with the tariff, the Liberty Justice Center may be interested in taking a case like this because they like high-profile cases. And I think what they would be asking for is a writ of mandamus to force a constitutional convention. But again, I don't work in that area, but I would think somebody like that could be pretty.
I appreciate that. We already have, we've spent several $100,000 to be able to get a draft declarative judgment, which is probably the approach that it would have to take if states end up suing.
Yeah, I mean, you try to do everything you can outside of litigation.
David,
Sure.
To bring litigation in.
Right.
Yeah, Mark.
David, I had a quick question for you and everything like that. We were actually talking about it on the World Edition earlier today. I know the Marines just celebrated their 250th anniversary, and there's been a couple of articles about maybe they have exceeded their functionality, as they were definitely an offshoot of the Navy and everything like that. So I was just wondering, in terms of this national debt, are there any efforts around the military spending, and can that be curtailed at all? Because this particular editorial that I was reading, I think it was in The Hill, was talking about the elimination of an entire branch. And I do have friends that are in all those branches, so I know that would probably create all kinds of stir in terms of public opinion and everything. But what is our thought about the military spending when it comes to the national debt?
Well, the Defense Department should not be off the table when we're looking at trying to right size and reform the federal government and reduce projected spending. That's clearly something that I've said publicly. It's something that's addressed in my latest book, America in 2040, Still a Superpower, ? I would question eliminating the Marines because when you look at where the national security threats are going forward, you need a force like the Marines that can be deployed anywhere in the world quickly. Remember the old bumper sticker. If it absolutely positively has to be done all overnight, call the U.S. Marines. And I'm not unduly influenced by the fact that my son was a Marine Corps captain who fought in Iraq.
But no, there's absolutely no conflict.
That is the fact that I want to disclose.
Right. Yeah, Rick.
So, but besides the fact that the current head of the Secretary of War is a little bit of a knucklehead, besides that, is the military structurally is the structure correct, or do there need to be realignments? Like, so the Marines are under the Navy. That seems fine. And every branch has its elite fighting force. You got the Green Berets, you got the SEALs. Does the military need to be rearranged?
Yes. I think that one of the things that we need to do is we'll need to take a hard look at current and projected threats. We need then to look at what size force do we need? How much of it should be active versus in reserves? I question whether or not the all-volunteer force is sustainable over time. I think we also have to recognize that now you have total visibility of the battlefield. Unless you're underwater, everything can be seen from space. And therefore, we also need to recognize that with the current weapon systems that we have, that a lot of the traditional platforms are very much exposed, including ships, as an example, and therefore we need to move much more towards unmanned vehicles, but in space, in air, on water, and underwater, and on the ground. And so, yeah, I do think that we need a comprehensive review and reassessment. Now, in this regard, I think it's important to note that just within the last few days, that the administration has issued the new national security strategy. And that new national security strategy places much more emphasis on the Western Hemisphere. It also places in the modernized Monroe Doctrine, if you will, as well as recognizing that, China is probably our greatest peer threat. But yes, I think we need a comprehensive review and reassessment.
So what you just mentioned that an all-volunteer army might not work. Do we need to give better incentives to get more and better people into the mill? I mean, the GI Bill was freaking great after World War II. It educated America, came back from the war, everybody went to college, then we have the Sputnik push for education, and now we are, we're the most technologically advanced country in the world, but other countries are catching up.
Well, I think one of the things that we have to do, in addition to look at force structure, footprint, and a variety of other things, I think we have to look at our compensation and benefit systems. In the private sector, you have three main forms of compensation. You have current cash, you have current benefits, and you had deferred benefits. Okay. In the military, you have the same three components, but in the private sector, the most money is spent on current cash, the second most on current benefits, the third most on deferred benefits. In the military, it's exactly the opposite. You spend the most on deferred benefits, the second most on current benefits, and the least on current compensation. So, which A, doesn't make sense, and B, is not sustainable in its present form. So I think, the compensation structure has to be looked at. I think you also have to recognize that the reserves are supposed to be they're supposed to be in the reserves, and yet in recent years in conflicts in Iraq and Afghanistan, we've deployed the reserves on a regular basis to be in combat in different places around the world. Last thing I would say is the current administration wants to minimize armed conflicts and wants to minimize U.S. engagement in overseas conflicts. Rightly or wrongly, that's part of their new national security strategy, and that means that it would be less of a draw on the reserves than has been in the recent past.
David, you mentioned you spoke in front of Congress last week, and it looks like you got pushback from both parties. The Republicans didn't want to increase taxes, and the Democrats didn't want to decrease expenses or spending. But to solve the national debt problem, isn't the best thing to do exactly opposite in unison? In other words, increase taxes and decrease spending. Then you have the most possible gain. So why isn't they just don't go the different direction, or do they even have a plan to solve this at this point in time? Does either party have any plan at all?
No, they have no plan. And the United States doesn't have a plan. I mean, we've been in business since 1789, despite the fact that there is a law that says that we're supposed to have a comprehensive, integrated strategic plan for the federal government. We don't have one. We're flying blind in mountains of debt without an instrument panel. The government just throws money at problems, whether things are working or not. They're not working. They even throw more money at the problem. Look, it's not just an issue of what I think, it's what the American people think. And it's the four-letter word in fiscal policy, which is math. We need to do several things. One, we need to grow the economy faster. All right. But we're not going to grow our way out of this problem. We're going to have to make tough choices on future spending and future revenues. When we're making those choices, we need to do it as a percentage of GDP. In other words, what percentage of GDP is the debt? What percentage of GDP is the deficit? What percentage of GDP is revenues? And what percentage of GDP is spending? When you look at those numbers, you find the following: that we're spending at a higher percentage of GDP than the post-World War II average, and going up. We're taxing at or somewhat below the historical average level of revenues to GDP post-World War II, and it's flat, okay? The gap between spending and revenues is getting greater. Therefore, the deficits as percentage of GDP are getting higher. Therefore, the debt as percentage of GDP is getting higher. When I went around the country in 2012, what I got from the American people was debt to GDP was the right thing to focus on, that we ought to try to get it down to about 90% over time, gradually over time. Today, we're at about 100. That's only if you count debt held by the public. We're 123 if you count total debt, okay? In addition to that, that we ought to, we need more spending reductions projected than revenue increases, but we need both. And the ratio was 2-to-1 spending reductions to revenue increases. But if you count interest, 3-to-1 spending reduction to revenue increases. And as you know, interest is our second largest expense, and it's our fastest growing expense, okay? And the last thing that they agreed to before we got into specific reforms was that any reform package needed to be consistent with 6 principles and values that brought people together rather than divide them apart. And they were pro-growth, socially equitable, culturally acceptable, mathematical integrity, politically feasible, and meaningful bipartisan support. And there's a lot of details that go with that. And you know, what they felt then, I'm confident they feel now. And I'm about ready to go back on the road in 2026 with Joe Penland to be able to confirm that later in 2026.
Okay, there's 2 other topics you wanted to bring up, David. It dealt with immigration and tariffs and how they affect the national economy as a whole. Can you give us a little briefing on why immigration and tariffs are important to this national debt?
Well, our immigration system needs fundamental reform. And now that we have border security, I think there's no excuse not to proceed with comprehensive immigration reform. And again, we need to take a much more strategic approach in how we deal with that. You know, for example, we want our immigration policies to provide opportunity for people from around the world, but we want our immigration policy to also be considered based upon the economic needs and competitive posture of the United States. In other words, we want to try to attract and retain the best and brightest so that we can help maintain our lead in innovation so that we can improve economic growth. We want to provide opportunities for individuals who are truly persecuted, whose lives are at risk because their actions are hostile to the current government. But we also need to make sure that we're not attracting people who can't support themselves, who are overly dependent on social welfare programs as a means to survive. You know, we need to look at our visa processes, recognize the difference between a pathway to citizenship, a pathway to legal status, and a temporary path to be able to work, to have work opportunities in the United States. I mean, I could go on and on. The bottom line is, what's before the Supreme Court on this issue, which is what I mentioned before, is the president has issued an executive order trying to change the definition of birthright citizenship. Now, I'll give you my opinion on that. He's basically saying that the parents have to be born in the United States in order to have automatic citizenship, and I don't believe that's appropriate, and I believe the Supreme Court will strike that down. I do, however, believe that at least one of the parents should be a U.S. citizen in order for there to be guaranteed birthright citizenship. And that, at a minimum, would take legislation. It might even take a constitutional amendment, but it's not something that can be done through executive order in my opinion. And then we can come to the tariffs later.
Okay. Any comments on the immigration, Dr. Sharif? Yes.
Yeah. Professor Dave, in our culture, we say professor, some scholar like you. So let's say still from Bangladesh, I have capacity to help US corporations or any organizations. Number one, with the research and innovations. Number two, with AI industries. Number three, with energy related activities. So very straightforward questions to you. If there are hundreds of talents in South Asia or in Bangladesh, so USA should welcome me and talented people and hardworking people who can contribute US economy. They should welcome us to US economy according to your comment, or we have to go for all of the process and white supremacy and everything.
You should be a higher priority. And the people that come to the United States to get degrees in the United States, who have degrees and performance that could help with regard to our economic growth, our innovation, and our competitive posture, should be a higher priority with regard to being able to, at first, gain legal status, all right, and secondly, but over time, citizenship. But it's earned.
Yeah, definitely. Law is very important. We have to follow the law, rules, and regulation. I just want to ensure, look, what I understand from US economy, US have many brilliant people like you, smart people like you, who has depth of understanding about US economy and what can do and what they should not do. But still, I believe that USA economy has more power because of his cultural impact with democracy, with social media, with Hollywood. And I believe that USA should focus on more immigrant and talented people who can contribute. That is my
I agree with that. I mean, as you know, in my book, I say it takes four things for a country to be a superpower: global economic power, global diplomatic influence, global military capability, and global cultural influence. And you're touching on the cultural issue, and I totally agree with you. We're the only country that meets all four of those. China is very close, if you will, and clearly desirous of being there. So I think we're in agreement, in general agreement.
Yeah.
Other
Thank you.
comments, questions? Yeah.
Yes.
Well, we'll move on to the final topic, which deals with not just immigrations, but tariffs. It looks like the U.S. government has raised a certain amount of money through tariffs, but may have also created a certain amount of problems. So what are your thoughts on tariffs, David?
Well, first, this is a complicated and confusing topic, okay? Let's talk about the issue that's before the Supreme Court. Challenges have been made that a number of the president's actions with regard to tariffs are unconstitutional. The Supreme Court is going to have to unscramble that egg. Here's kind of the way I look at it, and I'd be interested in comments from others. I put tariffs into three categories with regard to their legal veracity. The first category is where the two nations or multiple nations, whatever may be the case, have actually entered into good faith negotiations and have agreed on a settlement between the nations. And I think on those should be upheld because after all, they were the result of good faith negotiations and both sides agreed on it. Okay. The second set of tariffs are situations where the president would assert that there is a national security or public health reason to impose those tariffs. Okay. And there are less than a handful of nations that I think that you can make that argument. Okay. If you will. And we'll see how we'll see how the Supreme Court comes out on that. The third category, which involves a lot of nations, is where there was a unilateral imposition of tariffs under a theory that it was reciprocity, which it wasn't, okay, where there have been no negotiations or agreements resulting from those negotiations, and where there's not a clear and compelling national security or public health issue. In that situation, which I think is a vast majority of the countries, I think it's highly likely that the Supreme Court will strike those down. And then the issue is, well, what happens? Okay. Well, first, I don't think the Supreme Court is going to say you got to pay the money back. Okay. I think they're just going to say you can't collect the tariffs on a going forward basis. And then we'll see what happens through the courts if that's how they rule. But the other issue is I keep on getting these texts. I don't know about anybody else's on here. I keep on getting these texts about whether or not I want my $2,000 rebate from the tariffs. And I continue to say no. And the reason I continue to say no is A, we don't even know if these tariffs are going to stand after the Supreme Court makes its decision. Secondly, why do you give rebates when you're running a $1.8 to $1.9 trillion deficit? Okay. And while it's clearly true that we have significant revenues that we've achieved through these additional tariffs, and that over a 10-year period, if they continued, they could be $2-3 trillion. The fact is they may not continue, and the fact is we're running 1.8 to 1.9 trillion plus deficits as far as the eye can see. So there's just a lot of BS going on in this area, and which is frustrating.
Yeah. Dr. Sri.
Yeah, thank you. Can I propose an alternative solution for USA? This is intellectual discussion. Professor Dev, how much USA can make from their tariff? Example, from Bangladesh. Do you have any data or anything? Or Nick, do you have any data?
Patrick?
How much USA can make from the tariff strategy?
Okay, but I'm on a global podcast. Can you text me your?
No, I don't have any data for how much tariffs. The last I saw, the tariffs had accumulated about 300 billion, but that was just the U.S. debt clock. It's not. It's not. I can't say it's accurate. But
anyway, let's say
they don't break it down by country. I'm sure somewhere there is data on how much tariffs. Remember, they don't collect it from Bangladesh. They collect it from as
around
it's
the world
into the United States. It's the person who's buying it is paying those tariffs. So
yeah. Let's say I propose 3 times better business opportunity for USA. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's say Pot TV is very popular right now in Bangladesh. I send all of my audience people and everything's with you. I think we reach around 100 million people through university, through government agency, through financial institution, through corporation, even through mosque and university. We have 300,000 mosques in Bangladesh. And everybody said, hey, you have all of the Islamophobia and everything. And they said, hey, no, Dev Walker discussion is very interesting. We have to learn, even in mosque in Bangladesh. They say, hey, Nick, bring all of the brilliant idea. Jatovi is a very good speaker. Okay, we can listen. We want to be make friendship with you. So that is the way I overcome from the cultural barriers, right? There is a huge barriers in between North America and Bangladesh. So I overcome from the cultural barriers. So second things, that's why I said USA has huge impact with culture. So Pot TV has huge impact with your podcast. So second things, I always believe that, and we have a strategy, we have proposal, we have feasibility study. If we focus on my talent economy, 100 million people in Chittagong, it can be future of like Singapore. We build up our ecosystem in Chittagong Business Incubation. Everybody know Pot TV speakers. All of the students know. Secondly, example, we build up this Podda Bridge and barriers with India and this Rajbari and 23 districts. Master plan, urban planning from my World Talent Economic Forum doings. Let's say if American investors through their artificial intelligence, or you have all of the big company in USA, through energy company, you have many big company in USA, through this urban plan and educations and media. If you come, next 10 years, USA can make at least $1 trillion from Bangladesh, from my 100 million people, at least. So I do not know. Do you have real understanding about tariff or the emerging economy business, or how you actually make your strategy, how you make your policy, how you run your business strategy. That's why our talent economy working for more millionaires. We do not want billionaires. We do not want trillionaires. We want more millionaires. More millionaires come, then all of your tax, tariff, billion-dollar story, trillion-dollar economy will overcome from this situation. Trillionaire means you have poor people, and 1 and 2% are super rich. And millionaire means you have 100 million people, those who are millionaires, so you are making trillion-dollar economy. That is very simple economical thoughts. That is the things, the talent economy, that is the things the young peoples are trying to develop. So this is the time.
Yeah.
Those who have wisdom, like Dave Walker, like Nick Palveda, like Rick, and Jatovi is my age, definitely you should focus on this emerging economy like China. And you can overcome, like this 40 projects you build. It's $40 trillion economy for next 10 years. And it's very easy. Why you go for all of the immigrations, all of the white supremacy and everything? You people are best. You have best knowledge, best technology, best culture, and you have open society. Every people love this kind of culture. Even in
Well, we can't stereotype all Americans, just like we can't stereotype everybody in Bangladesh. I will say that the United States, tends to assume that since it's the leading superpower on earth, that we must be number one, number two, or number three in everything, and we're not. Okay. Secondly, I will also say that the United States typically is not as good in learning from history and learning from others, which I think is important. Thirdly, I would say that the United States tends to think that it can go it alone on a lot of things, when I'm a big believer in partnering for progress. And you may recall, Doctor, that I was, as Comptroller General of the United States, I was on the board of the Supreme Audit Institution Global Organization. I was also head of strategic planning. And so I had very good relations with my counterparts around the world, including in China and Russia. I had very good, because they were professional relationships. They weren't political relationships. In addition, you talk about Islam and, if you will, I mean, I'm honored to have the highest honor that the country of Indonesia gives from the president of Indonesia, and they are the largest Islamic nation on earth. They have the largest Islamic population on earth, if you will. So, I think a lot of the people that are involved in Pod TV, have much broader and longer horizons than many people in our respective countries. And I think that we can learn from each other and hopefully capitalize on positive experiences and avoid common mistakes. So I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, also, Dr. Sharif, I would say that you're dealing with an element, but it's not a majority element of the Islamophobia or whatever the people have over here. It is here, but it's not. I don't think it's the vast majority of the people in the United States whatsoever. My brother-in-law is actually a Muslim, Iqbal. I mean, and he's actually not from your Pakistan. He's actually from Pakistan, Karachi, not from Dhaka. But the thing is, the U.S. is very much has a lot of different cultures because it's so big.
Yes.
But also they do have a certain amount of elements that tend to clash and create issues where probably they should be working on solutions to problems rather than creating more problems. Yes, Jatovi.
Just want to say, the problem I think that I guess Doctor is seeing is a problem that many in the minority community see and want to overcome. It is very true that the U.S. itself is not the majority isn't on that side of being Islamophobic, racist, so on and so forth. The majority is not. But the problem comes into play. The policies say different, because there is systemic racism that we still haven't been able to address. There still is an institutionalized racism that still hasn't been addressed. There are problems in our society which we like to cover up because we do want to be the best and we aspire to be that way, and we try to hold up this beacon, but that beacon is tarnished and we've never really cleaned that tarnish or cleaned that actual beacon to make it this spectacular thing that we speak of and that we promote. So there are problems, and I can understand what Dr. Sharif is talking about. And the sad part is that we were in the death throes of that, and that death rattle has come back stronger because of the things that we continue to promote right now. It was at an extreme. These things that we are speaking of were on the outskirts, but now they're in the middle, and we just have to be honest about where it is before we can actually address the problem. Because when we have individuals, and this was shown in the actual text messages that were sent out, and again, I don't want to make this a sides thing because that's what we end up running into, and then we end up running into a problem of, well, my side is different than yours, or your. No side, no body, no person, no group has all of the racism or all the misogyny or all of whatever ism is there. No side is beholden to all of that. But the problem comes into play when one side has that position of power and begins to push that. And that's where we're at right now. We just have to be honest and be able to call it out when we see it, because that helps everybody push that to the edges. Because there are parts, there are things that I could point out easily that have been propagated today that are part of the problem that Dr. Sharif is even pointing to. And just because he's pointing to it, it is something that we need to address and be honest about and look at ourselves and move forward from that.
Yeah. I need to get going, but let me say a couple of things before I go. Okay. First, our Constitution makes it clear that we strive to form a more perfect union over time. We will never be perfect. Okay. But we want to continue to improve over time. And we still do have areas where we need to improve. There's no question about that. Okay. And secondly, you can't solve a problem until you recognize that you have a problem that needs to be solved and are committed to solving it. I apologize. I've got to get going. Why don't you all continue? Thank you very much.
Thanks, David.
See you next
Thank
week.
you.
Okay.
Appreciate it. Right.
And I think Dave hit it on the head with that. That is it. And that goes to, it's just the natural thing. An alcoholic will never understand that they're an alcoholic until they admit that they have an alcohol addiction or they have a problem. A country that has issues within itself and in positions of power that it's propagating information that is blatantly and openly, for example, calling the whole Somalian community trash. That is blatant and open racism. We just have to be able to admit that before and then begin to move on from it. We can't say it's a joke. We can't say these things are a joke because the positions that they're coming from begins to exacerbate the situation throughout our society and begins to become part of our ethos. When we trained our own society that people coming across the border are evil, are coming to take your jobs, are coming to rape your women, are coming to do, that's where we come into creating a problem for our society. Therefore, anybody who has any melanin in their skin becomes a target for individuals to hate. Hence the reason why we have spikes in hate crimes that have been going on since the beginning. Hate crimes have been up for a while, but there have been spikes that have started since 2014. Matter of fact, it even began before that. And this is why Sarah Palin, and that's one of the individuals that started a lot of this, because she attacked Barack Obama during the presidential election, called said, "Oh, well, he's a Muslim." Well, first and foremost, there's nothing wrong with being Muslim. Nothing at all. Being Muslim is the same thing as being Catholic. Being Catholic is the same thing as being Baptist. It's just something that people believe in to help them find peace within themselves. They have found that center.
Whoa.
They have found growth in themselves. We should celebrate that. We should learn from it and continue to grow from that. But that's not what we do. We treat it as a divisive piece and continue that divide and continue to attack each other on those ways rather than just like Dr. Sharif is trying to push for. We should be building bridges and building things together, because honestly, there are things in the Muslim belief that are different from the Christian belief or from the Catholic belief that you can learn from. I mean, like, think about all the buildings and all the ways that we can improve our society. We haven't adapted to. If you look at Google, I'll give Google a hand for when they started making the push to allowing their sensors to recognize brown skin. It was never recognized before, but that's something that we don't think about because it's not part of that society or that ethos, because the individuals that you end up hiring and going down the path with.
Yeah, off that brown skin thing, I used to check IDs in Colorado, which is a very white state, and all their photo machines on the driver's licenses were set for white people. So if you got a driver's license for a black person, there was no details. You couldn't tell. It was ridiculous because the machines. But anyway, what you were saying about working, we all have to work together under tech, because the tech bros who are developing AI, there was an article in yesterday's LA Times, the highest grade that any AI company gets for protecting us from existential threats, from AI killing us all, the highest grade anybody gets is a C+. We have to come together to work with AI and make sure it doesn't kill us, because the tech bros are not going to do it for us.
Yeah, but AI is also very helpful, because when you want to research things today, it's a lot faster than you could do. I mean, you have to double check it, but your research can be done a lot faster using AI than
it's great for that, but there's no money in that for AI. If you want,
I don't know how. Hey, Rick, honestly, I don't know how they make any money at it, but I can tell you, I enjoy the features of AI because my research goes a lot faster than without it. Even though there is still some blanks that I can't get answers to, it certainly has developed a lot better than it used to be.
I mean, AI is a phenomenal tool. But the thing is, you've got to realize AI is the same thing that you've done for years. Because what you were just talking about, Nick, not knowing of how AI is going to be able to make money in the future and so on and so forth. It's the same thing that Google has done. It's the same thing that Yahoo has done. It's the same thing that Bing has done, which then changed to something else. It's just becoming a search engine to help you get to the end point that you want to have happen in the first place. Because if you think about it, what do you do before AI? What did you do when you were looking up stuff? You would just go to Google and type it in. So that's what ChatGPT is doing. That's what all the AI is doing, is just grabbing all the information, throwing into a simple Cliff Notes version that you can read up and say, okay, now I know.
Right.
But again, it's just grabbing the information off the internet across the different servers. Therefore, you must check, recheck it still.
And we're going to have to get positioned more in Bangladesh, because they have 3 billion people next door to where Dr. Sharif lives, where the United States only has 300 million. So we have a viewership of 10 times greater in that area than we do, unfortunately, in the United States. So we're going to be more involved. I'll have to go to Doc and
our team is so popular, so you will get all of the red carpet reception when you visit.
Well, we're gonna have to make arrangements. I'll have to go over there and visit you there. But in the meantime, we have to get off the air because we're out of time. We'll see you next week on Economics with the Honorable David M. Walker. Take care. Bye-bye.